All right, today we're going to talk about cooling systems a little bit, and commonly this happens, well, really we see it all the time. So when you call us about an engine package, lots of you know we do the ultimate turnkey package from radiator to the fuel tank. And when we recommend a radiator, I promise you there's very good reason behind that. So I've got quite a few examples here today. I'm going to show you. This beautiful Bronco behind me was fully restored. This is one of the nicest Bronco restorations I've seen. I mean, beautiful. What's the customer's problem? It doesn't cool correctly. So the motto of pay me now or pay me later really applies to this. So I don't know how many shops it went to. Maybe it was the same shop that restored it, but they could not get it to cool. And so there was a lot of blame put on the engine and things of that nature. Ultimately, it rolls into our facility. We do our due diligence on verifying the engine is good. We pump it down, cooling system is sealed, we don't have a head gasket leak. So we do some preliminary, and we looked at what he had and basically recommended a new radiator and fan package. Obviously, the customer in the past had went from I think a single 16-inch fan, then they went to some dual 10-inch fans. He bought 3 or 4 different radiator packages and spent well over $4,000, and it still wasn't fixed. So of course we recommend a radiator. He's really reluctant to spend more money. The key is when there's a problem, you analytically and critically think about how to properly correct it. And you know, having a car shop as an engine company helps us direct you better when you're purchasing a tailored engine for your vehicle. So what we ended up here was our friends at Wizard Cooling set us up with a radiator package that would not only fit in the vehicle, we had to make a couple little tweaks, and it's got a fan shroud with 4 fans. Because of the layout and how tight everything is in this engine compartment, I believe these fans are somewhere between an 8 and 10 inch, and there's 4 of them. This thing comes up to temperature, fans come on, drags the temperature down, and the fans shut off. And the key there is the fans should cycle. If they don't cycle, you don't have enough fan, you don't have enough CFM. So moral is, new radiator package, 4 fans on this particular one, and it cools correctly. Okay, happy customer, but he could have saved himself a lot of money on the front side if, I'll say, the shop knew cooling systems inside and out like we do. So let's take a look at a few other examples we have. So normally most of the cars in our facility are cars that have our engines and our cooling systems, but from time to time beautiful restorations like this one come in. Maybe they got some problems or they just want us to finalize their work. This particular vehicle's got a FE in it. It is not our engine, and it's got a pretty good radiator from DeWitt's, okay? This one is another clear example of paying attention to the radiator and the shrouding, okay? So FEs traditionally are hard to cool as it is. This one has a 1-to-1 pulley stack ratio, so we're really not overdriving the water pump, which is more desirable in a street car to overspeed it. You really don't want 1-to-1, and you certainly don't want underdriven in street applications. But what's going on with this one and overheating issue is that we've got a good radiator and we really have pretty decent fans, but the way that they're mounted, there is no shroud. So what ends up happening is some of the air comes through the front, but where there's open areas on this backside, we're sucking hot engine bay air, and it's cheating the radiator, going right back through the fan and going back in the engine bay. So we're really not sucking on that entire core to properly cool this. This particular application, all it really needs is a shroud to block all that in, seal it off to where we draw all the air through the front of the car and obviously through the radiator to cool it correctly, not only for the engine, but also for the air conditioning. You want your air conditioning to obviously be cold. That's the whole idea. We have to cool that condenser core, so we want to get a lot of area of air through that condenser core as well. So This one, just another example of shrouding, so we'll take you to the next one. So another example is a 69 Mustang that we obviously did a whole drivetrain of our own in here. Friends over at Wizard Cooling provided us a cooling system. Normally when we're using theirs, we're using a brushless style fan. Unfortunately, in this engine compartment, there is not enough room to do that. So it's got their shroud, but for whatever reason, this particular shroud, they had carved out some nice looking areas of that shroud that basically it's more for looks and for air to, again, pass through. So when we first started this, we kind of knew that we were going to have a little bit of an issue cooling wise, but we wanted to verify it. So we left all the cutouts in the shroud, fired it up, did our due diligence. This thing hung at 205 and the fans would run constantly. 205 is not really overheating, but when we can't get the fan to cycle, tells us we really have an airflow issue. So what we did, and you can kind of see the filler panels, we ended up sealing the shroud completely to this radiator and filling in all of the cutouts that they had. And that efficiency, I don't know what the percentage was, but I mentioned the other day when we did a little video on this vehicle, it runs 190 all day long and the fans will cycle with this application. So small little issue, problem solved. Once again, fully shrouded, seal the fans and the shroud to the radiator so we can get all that air through that radiator. Very, very, very important. All right, so this one is this is a perfect example of a properly built radiator package. No modifications necessary. This is what we primarily use, whether it's single or dual fans. Again, our friends at Wizard Radiator did a fantastic job. This is a full restoration in-house Mercury Cougar. Got a 427, maybe even a 408, can't quite remember, but our Windsor package. So a couple of things. This radiator, it's a dual core, 1.25" cores, so we get a little bit more cooling capacity, and it's featuring Spall's brushless 16-inch fan. Now you might have missed it, but you could tell that this fan, this car was just out on the street doing a little bit of street tuning, and the fan was still running. So a couple of things that we're going to cover here. One is why we really suggest certain pulley systems for your vehicle. That is to get us enough area and room to put a good radiator package like this in. If we use long water pumps and pulley stacks that stick out too far, especially in Ford applications, then we sacrifice what we can use for a radiator and cooling fan. So again, Wizard Radiator, brushless fan, and this has got a March front end. You'll see it's tight, but everything fits, and this car cools fantastic. One of the things that we do on every single cooling system, we wire it a little differently than the directions ask for. So generally, we have power to the relay or control at all times. The temp sender in the radiator is what controls the fans to come on. It's not based on key on power. There's a reason why we do that. So the fans do not run until the engine comes up to temperature. Beautiful thing about the brushless, they'll ramp up and they'll ramp down. So it doesn't hit all that amperage draw at once, which is really, really nice. Got a nice car in the background. Number two, after, let's just say we're on a chassis dyno, or maybe we're making a hard run and we shut it off, we want the fan to continue to run to pull some air through that radiator, get the air moving across that engine to just help with any kind of heat soak, so that way we don't have our overflow jug puking on the ground. So we do wire them a little differently, but again, great, great opportunity to show you an application that is properly set up from the get-go. All right, before we move on to my last example, this Pontiac Solstice here, obviously, again, it's here for a cooling system issue. It wasn't really, that's a factory radiator and fan setup, but nobody went to properly check fan speed and was fan 1 or 2 coming on at the correct time. It's LS swapped, which is pretty unique. Again, though, it's here for a cooling system problem. So when we're telling you or suggesting a certain radiator package, yes, they're generally not as cheap as you would like them to be, But all these cars are here for a reason, and they've definitely spent their money more than once, okay? So that's the key point, is to spend it once, spend it right the first time. All right, so my last example here is a Mustang that we're sticking a 427 small block Ford, around 600 horsepower, boreless stack TFI. This one features a DeWitt's radiator. This is the radiator off the shelf that they would provide you. We also have a custom one-core radiator that we do with them. So this one features standard brush style fans. It's got the temp sender in the radiator so we can control the fans like we prefer to, where the fans can slowly ramp down or shut off once the radiator's cold and we've keyed off. And this one, you'll see there's lots of room between this pulley kit. This one does offer quite a bit of clearance for the tight Mustangs. We're running a billet specialties front end, got lots of overdrive speed on the water pump, and we got plenty of room between this radiator package and fans. This is kind of nice because it does retain the original bracket to retain the radiator. It's a floating design versus something that's bolted strictly to the core support. So this one here will also properly cool. Normally we're using brushless fans once again. This one was sold earlier than when we went to the brushless. And there's a lot to be said about the brushless fans and why we use those today. But this will cool this application correctly. This one also features on the shroud is these little flaps. I'm not a huge fan of them. The idea is when you're going down the road that some air can bypass the radiator, because if all the air goes through the fans, it kind of makes the fan work harder, and then obviously its service life might be shortened a small amount. That's the glory of the brushless fans, is they'll slow down, almost shut off while we're going down the highway. That allows the air to go right through the fan itself. So again, not a huge fan of that, but that does work. The idea is when you're at idle, the fans drawing the air through will suck that flap shut. So we get all the air, once again, going through the radiator from the front of the car, obviously through the radiator to properly cool it. So once again, as an engine builder that tailors their engine builds and the vehicle packages specifically for you, I really feel like you need to put that trust in us. We've been there, done that. I have spent tons of money on radiators and fans that didn't work. We call it here tuition. That cost us a lot of money to figure it out. So when we give you a recommendation, there is reason behind it, and we really do mean it.